Welcome back, guys, to the SOC level 2 track. If you remember, we have finished all of these Splunk tutorials, all of these Splunk rooms. In today's video, we're going to wrap all of what we have learned in the previous videos and solve this challenge, Fixit. Now, unfortunately, Fixit is not about solving a cybersecurity incident or a cybersecurity case. Rather, it's about testing your knowledge on Splunk configuration files, or how to configure Splunk to handle logs and parse them. Alright, so basically, if you haven't done these rooms before, I recommend you guys to go back and check them out. If you are stuck, you can check out my videos on SOC level 2 track. I'm going to put the video or the playlist in the video description. Now, let's jump to Fixit. So this is Fixit challenge, and it's all about you in the shoes of a SOC analyst trying to make sense of a log file that has unique format. So before I do this challenge, guys, let me give you an introduction to some of the most important configuration files that you need to understand how they work and their purpose before we jump and solve the challenge. Okay, so what are the most important Splunk configuration files and why do we need to understand them? So basically, Splunk configuration files are these files that we actually configure to manage the source of the data and to manage how we parse and analyze the data. For example, let's say we have a log file. Let's say it is a web server log file, webserver.log, okay? And this file contains the logs that we want to analyze. But the thing is, sometimes Splunk doesn't have the necessary rules to parse some sort or some format or some logs formats. That's why if you have a log file which Splunk cannot extract the fields properly, then what we have to do, we have first to define the source of the logs. So in our case, the source of the logs is the web server log, but how do we define that in the Splunk configuration files? What configuration file I need to check to make sure that I am actually pulling the logs from the right source? It's actually the inputs.conf. In the inputs.conf, I define data inputs and I define how to collect data sources. So inside the inputs.conf, what I can do here, I can write the path to the log file. In the practical scenario, I'm going to show you guys how the inputs.conf looks like. Alright, so now I told Splunk what is my data source. It is the webserver.log. Okay, now the next thing, I want to define what is called as the parsing rules. So since this is a unique, we are assuming that this is a unique log file and the format of this log file couldn't be properly handled by Splunk, I need to define the parsing rules. The parsing rules, I tell Splunk how to extract the fields. So let's say it depends on the log file. Let's say the log file contains several fields such as the IP address, the HTTP method, right? The timestamp, and it could have the URL. All of these fields are actually contained in the web server log, but they have not been properly extracted by Splunk, and therefore I cannot analyze them. That's why I have to define the parsing rules. So where I define the parsing rules, I define the parsing rules in props.conf. Inside this file, what I can do here, I can define the fields I want to extract, okay, and I can use regular expressions to extract them. Alright, so the next thing I want to do, after I have defined the source of the logs, data source, the parsing rules, what are the fields I want to extract, then again I want to enrich or perform what's called data enrichment on the index events. So here we call it data enrichment. Data enrichment is very useful if you want Splunk to extract additional fields on what have been defined here. So if you remember, guys, from previous tutorials and videos, when we used to analyze the logs, we had like the logs here, events, and on the left side we have the fields. If you scroll down, you will see statement extract more fields in Splunk. Sometimes Splunk will be able to automatically extract them, but again, if the format of the logs could be properly handled and the fields were not properly extracted, we need to use these steps. So data enrichment helps us extract more fields. Where to define data enrichment rules? In transforms. So inside transforms.conf, again, I use regular expressions or regular expression to perform the extraction. All right. And the last thing I want to do, it is the indexes. So I want to define what is the index that will store the data, the retention policies. So the storage. Inside the storage, I define the indexes, and indexes are defined under indexes.conf. Okay. Now inside indexes.conf, I define the data index, right? And I define the retention policies, how the data will stay in the index, and so on. We're going to show these in the practical scenario. Right, so most of the time, these are the most important 4 steps if you want to handle unique logs, right? Or unique format of the logs. Now, there is one more thing I didn't mention, and I hope you guys wondered that why he didn't talk about this. It is the location of these files. So how to find these files? It's actually under OPT, Splunk, and then apps. All right, so here it is. Here it comes. So usually you can edit these configuration files under the search and reporting app in Splunk, or what you can do here, guys, you can create your own app. So basically here, let's say your app. You can create your own app with 2 clicks away from Splunk interface. Okay. After you create your app, you will find it here. Now, these files will be found under this path, your app / default, under this directory. Under this directory, you will create these configuration files. So after we talked about these configuration files, let's now understand the problem. So in the challenge, the first thing we have to fix is the event boundaries. So fix the event boundaries in Splunk. As the image below shows, Splunk cannot determine the event boundaries as the events are coming from an unknown device. So these are the events, as you can see, and it's very clear that they are not actually properly parsed, and it is highlighted. We need to define the source of these events. Now if you check out the next photo, the next problem statement, extract some custom fields. Once the event boundaries are defined, okay, it's time to extract the custom fields. Basically, guys, event boundaries are very important to define what is the beginning of the event and what is the end of a specific event. Okay, now here, as you can see, let's go back. Look at this. So it starts here, network log. That's the first event. Next timestamp starts as United Kingdom, and there is no event boundary. There is no clear line where the event begins. Does it begin at this, where it says Japan at, or does it begin where it states the source of the events, network log, or does it begin at the country name? It's not clear. We have to define the event boundaries, where the event starts and where it ends. That's what event boundary is. Once the event boundaries are defined, it's time to extract the custom fields to make the events searchable. So let's agree on a common thing between us, which is, let's say that network log is the start of the event. So the source of the logs, okay, which is network log, is the beginning line or the beginning of an event. If we agree on that, we need then to extract the the fields. What are the important fields for us? To extract the fields, we have to take a look at the logs. So this is a sample log. The logs from the log file, these are samples. And here we can see we have many important fields to extract. Basically, the problem statements, or the problem statement indicates or says that we want to extract these fields: username, the country, source IP, department, and domain. To be able to extract these fields from these logs, we will use regular expression as we said it in the a while ago. After we have defined the event boundaries and we extracted the fields, now it's time to actually see how Splunk will display them in the interface. All right. So now let me tell you what I did. The first thing we have to do, we have to navigate to the path of these configuration files. As I mentioned earlier, the path of these configuration files should be under etc. Let's see here. So bin, etc. And then we have apps. Okay. So as you can see, guys, these are the apps installed in this Splunk instance. Now, the app we're interested in fixing is Fixit. So cd Fixit. The configuration files are stored usually under the default directory. So cd default. Okay. All right. So thing is, I have created to name fields, props, and transforms. These are the configuration files I created. And now inputs and app were actually created before, so I haven't created these. Let's take a look at the inputs configuration file to see if the index and the logs, the data source, is properly defined. So cat inputs. Let's take a look here. So this is the path of the logs. It's properly defined. Network logs is the source of the logs. Okay, let's see the index. The index is main, the source is networks, and the source type is network underscore logs, and the interval is 1. Alright, so it seems that data source and the index are properly defined in the inputs. So we don't need to do anything about this. The next thing we want to do, guys, we want to define the rules to parse the logs. Okay, if you remember, I told you guys at the very beginning of the video, we have to create props, transforms, and fields. We talked about the purpose of these files. Let's take a look at props, and let me explain to you how I created the extraction rules. So props. Okay. So, you know, guys, this file is responsible for defining the extraction rules, okay, the parsing rules. Let's start with the first line. So the first line says should underscore line merge. This is called stanzas. Stanzas are actually configurations that define how data is processed and how it is parsed. Okay, these are rules that will be applied on the log file. This is the log file. We will apply these rules on the log file. These stanzas actually parses the log file. It breaks it down into meaningful compartments so that later we will be able to extract the fields. So should underscore line merge equals to true. Should underscore line merge determines whether lines should be merged into a single event or treated as separate events. And next we have break only before, which is another stanzas. So stanzas here, it defines where we should start our event. Let's go back. This is the log file. Now, as you can see, guys, this represents a log entry. This represents an event. So every event, as you can see, it starts with network log and it ends at the timestamp. So what we have to do, the break only before, we have to start the beginning of the event. The beginning of the event is network log. So we put it here with, as you can see, an escape, because this is a regular expression. So here we define the beginning of the event, and we put that the should underscore line merge equals true. So far we handled the line break and we handled where the event starts. Transform dash data, it is another stanzas. It's used when you want to perform transformations on the fields or on the logs. Since we have created transforms.conf, we have to mention it here. Okay. If you have not, or if you are in a case or scenario where you don't need to create transforms, then you have to remove such line. It means that transform dash data is not needed, will not be needed if you don't create transforms. Okay, you remember this. Now, because we created transforms, we have to actually reference the transforms mentioned here in the props.conf. In my case, the transforms are given this value, data underscore custom underscore fields. You can change this value however you want. Okay, now let's take a look at the other configuration file, which is the transform. Remember, transforms allows you to extract the fields. It allows you to specify what fields you want to extract from the log file. So let's take a look at the transforms. All right, let's start. So as you can see, we have data underscore custom underscore fields. So remember, I referenced this here because this is the name of the transform. And then I use regular expression. So the regular expression is very important to extract the fields. There is no other way around this. We have to reuse regular expression. So this is the regular expression that I used. This breaks the log down into multiple compartments or multiple fields. So that I can extract the username and the department, the domain, the source IP, and the country as stated here. In the problem statement, it mentions that we are required to extract these fields. So based on the format of the log file, I have used this regular expression, okay, and then I define the format which includes the fields I want to extract. And then we have another stanzas, which is the write meta equal to true, and that's it. This is the transform. The transform, to recap, the transform configuration file contains a regular expression, okay, that will extract the fields, and the format. The format will list what are the fields I want to extract. So we go back, we have username field. You can name this as whatever you like. You can name it as user if you want. You can, these are actually, it's convenient to name them as you want. Okay, if you want to change the name, change it, but we have to follow the problem statement specification. The specifications impose this naming convention on the fields, but in real scenarios, we can choose whatever we like as a name for the field. Okay, so these are optional in the way you name them. Of course, not in the way you have to choose them or not. Okay, so country, source IP, domain, department, and username. I specify the fields I want to extract after I choose the proper regular expression. And then after I finish creating a transform, I have to reference the transform in the props configuration file. And the last thing we want to create, it is the fields.conf. The fields.conf, let's see what it is. Let me clear. Next, we have to tell Splunk that the fields we want to extract, we want them to be extracted at the index time. So we use fields.conf, cat fields.conf. This is the last step, which is mentioning the fields that we have extracted or specified in the transforms. And we use the statement indexed equal true, so that we index the fields that we have extracted. All right, the last thing we want to do is to restart the Splunk instance. We can do that by using this command, bin Splunk restart. After we do that, then we will be able to properly handle or parse the fields. Let's go back now. Let's go here. These are the fields, or these are the logs. As you can see, the events, whatever you call them. So these are the events. As you can see now, the events are properly defined. The event boundaries are properly set. All the events start with event log, as you can see here. Previously, it wasn't clear where they start. One time they start at the country name, another time they start at the network log, which is the source name. So we have successfully fixed the event boundaries problem, and we have extracted new fields. The fields we have specified in the transforms have been successfully extracted: username, the source IP, domain and department, and the country. Now that we have properly ingested and parsed the events, it's time now to do the analysis. Alright, let's see the questions. What is the full path of the Fixit app directory? We answered this. What stanza will we use to define the event boundary in this multi-line event case? It was break only before to specify the start of the event. Now in some cases, we might be interested in defining where the event ends. Okay, in that case, we replace before with after, break only after. Alright, in the inputs.conf, what is the full path of the network logs? It was defined and we showed it. What regular expression will help us define the event start? It is network log. We also answered this. Now let's go to the analysis part. What's the capture domain? So if you go back here and we click on the domain field, we can see in all the top 10 values, there is one domain that was accessed. It is cybertees.thn. How many countries are captured in the logs? Again, the countries this question can be answered by looking at the field and the count. It is 12. Likewise in the departments, usernames, and source IP. Which configuration files were used to fix our problem? And I already answered this: the props, the transforms, and the fields. And what are the top 2 countries that user Robert tried to access the domain from? Great. So now we're going to have to do the filtering. So we have the index mentioned here. Now we have to narrow down the results to focus on Robert. So we're going to click on Robert Wilson. And then we have to use some SPL, or search processing language. If you remember, we have talked about SPL. Visit my video on introduction to search processing language on Splunk to understand how we used various functions and commands to filter and narrow down the events into meaningful insights. Now we can use the pipe, and here we're going to use table country. Here we mention, or we list the country in a table format, but we have to do more than that. We have to sort them in a descending order. So what we're going to do, we're going to use sort dash count, and to make them look nice, we're going to use dedup country, eliminate the duplicates. So they are sorted top down. It starts with Canada, and in the next position, or the second position, we have the states. So Canada and the states. Which user accessed the secret document on the website? Fine. Let's go back to the events, and we remove all of this. Okay. Fine. Now let's look if there is a field that will let us actually filter the events based on the request. It's very clear that the question here requires us to filter the events based on the request. So the user he accessed secret.document, secret document. This is the file that has been requested in an HTTP request. So there must be a field that allows us to extract the URLs, but clearly there is not. And even in the logs, go back here, in the logs, in the given logs, there is actually, look at this. This is the accessed URL. We could have actually extracted such field, but it wasn't required in the problem statement. Now we have 2 options to solve this question. The first option is to go back to the transforms, okay, the transforms configuration file, and specify another regular expression to extract this. This is the path. If we are able to extract this, we will have a new field which is named as a URL. This will enable us to view the accessed files or the accessed requests. Alright, if you don't want to take the long way, you can answer this question by just using keywords. In SPL, if there are no fields representing our query, then we resort to using keywords. The keyword is just using a keyword that actually represents our query. The query here is to look for the secret document. We're gonna just use it. Secret document, that's our keyword. And Splunk will look for through all the events and see where secret-document is mentioned. You can see these are the events where secret document was requested. To make this easier, we can change from list into raw, and this will highlight. Let's do that. Let's use 2 asterisks. Okay, this is way easier when we use the raw. As you can see, guys, this is the requested URL. It highlights the PDF document, and as you can see, in all the time, it was requested by username Sarah Hall. All the time, we see Sarah Hall asking to access this document. So the answer is Sarah Hall. So this way we have covered this room and we have solved the challenge. I hope you guys found this helpful, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.